For today's briefing, we'll have updates from Rob Schweitzer, Director of Fire Centre Operations with the BC Wildfire Service, Peter Brock, Executive Director of Regional Operations with Emergency Management BC, Staff Sergeant Janelle Schweihet, BC RCMP spokesperson, and Dr. Bonnie Henry, Provincial Health Officer. A reminder to media on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. With that, I'll turn it over to Rob Schweitzer, Director of Fire Centre Operations with the BC Wildfire Service.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I'll start off with just discussing a little bit of the current situation and some of the stats that we've seen year to date. So since April 1st, 2021, the BC Wildfire Service has responded to about 1,230 wildfires. That's resulted in about 425,000 hectares of area burned. And we are only halfway through the fire season. There are currently 253 active wildfires burning in British Columbia, and 38 of them are wildfires of note. 174 of these are due to natural causes, while 15 of these are human caused. The 10-year average for this period, this time of the year, is about 642 fires or 105,000 hectares burned. So obviously we're significantly ahead of the 10-year average. On the good news, over the last few days, we've seen those daily ignition numbers subside a bit, mostly due to the lack of lightning that we haven't experienced in the province. And we're seeing a more stable weather pattern this week. And really what that means to our firefighters and our incidents is they'll continue to burn steadily, those fires, those big fires that we have on the land base. And we won't have that impact of significant wind-driven events with aggressive fire growth. So it'll help us make progress on some of those suppression efforts. We've also seen a slight decline in the total number of wildfires burning. Although the stable weather pattern will be helpful for overall suppression efforts, it will also mean that the smoke will sit. And we do expect to see more stagnant smoke in the coming days. So please take those necessary precautions regarding air quality. It also hinders our aircraft to be able to fight these fires, but it appears that the weather will change by this Friday and we'll start to see some of the smoke clear out and some of the temperatures increase, as we've seen in the provincial forecast for the next 3 to 4 days. So the resources for British Columbia, we have 3,650 personnel engaged in the response efforts in BC. About 1,100 of those are contractors and 318 of them are from out of province, with 194 aircraft engaged in this province. And in response to the current conditions, the BC Wildfire Service remains committed to prioritizing its efforts to protect life and property, those most valuable assets. Crew safety and resource management remains a top priority, and we'll make sure that our crews and our partners are rested appropriately, as this will be a long season. We'll continue to procure those domestic international firefighting resources, and that will remain a focus, even though that we've been lucky enough to have 100 firefighters from Quebec join our province last Friday, July 23rd. And they've been assigned into the Okanagan, where they're on the Brenda Fire, the White Rock Lake Fire, and the Thomas Creek incident. We've also received 50 20-person unit crews from Mexico last Saturday, and they're assigned to the South Okanagan on the Asturias Fire. And then the first 90-person crew from the Canadian Armed Forces will be on the front lines at Thomas Creek tomorrow, July 28th. And then 34 Australian personnel will arrive this evening. They'll be briefed and they'll be have a bit of a rest period before they're assigned to an incident somewhere in the province. So we continue as the BC Wildfire Service to work diligently with our partner agencies to really have that shared safety protocols and strategies when conducting operations to minimize any COVID-19 exposure to personnel or to the communities. And finally, on the resourcing, I would like to really recognize our BCWS staff who have been on hard work and nonstop since June 28th on the front lines, partnered with our contractors, our partner agencies such as the forest industry and the BC cattlemen and the First Nation communities, all collectively together. Their support is greatly appreciated and is leading to the success of the progress that we're making so far in this wildfire season. The one topic that I did want to really focus on, and it's of most importance to the public of BC, is around evacuation reluctance. So over this past weekend, there's been several reports of individuals who are not heeding evacuation orders. And BC Wildfire Service operational efforts have been diverted, including helicopters and aircraft, to support individuals who have been trapped behind the fire line. Most people in BC have never experienced an active wildfire event, and the conditions that we're seeing this year are some of the most extreme that have ever been experienced in this province. So those situations can be disorienting and confusing, and your ability to keep yourself and your family safe may be severely impacted. So our firefighting crews, they plan multiple evacuation escape routes, and they understand when to use them and to keep themselves safe in these wildfire situations. So people who are subject to an evacuation order but who remain beyond the recommended departure time may find that their anticipated evacuation routes blocked or their access to information limited. And we've even seen in other jurisdictions numerous fatalities that have occurred when people chose to remain behind and decided to leave only when the fire got closer. So I really urge everyone that is listening today that we do need the public's cooperation and support on this front. When an evacuation order has been issued by the local government, please heed those warnings, please heed those times so that we keep everyone safe throughout this fire season. So I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to Tara. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Our next operational update comes from Peter Brock, Executive Director of Regional Operations with Emergency Management BC.
Good afternoon. I'm going to provide an update on evacuation orders and alerts, followed by some information for those that are travelers and potentially impacted by the wildfires. I'll also be providing an update for those wishing to donate to British Columbians impacted by the wildfire season. So currently in British Columbia, we have 27 states of local emergency. We have 8 band council resolutions. We have 61 evacuation orders that represent approximately 3,700 properties on order. We have 85 evacuation alerts. That represents approximately 18,000 properties on alert. There are currently 21 reception centers supporting evacuees, and over 5,000 evacuees are currently registered. Please visit Emergency Info BC for a list of reception centers near you, or call our emergency support services line at 1-800-585-9559. A little bit on personal preparedness and public safety. I just want to reiterate the messaging provided by my colleague at BC Wildfire. I want to remind everyone to follow the directions of local authorities. If placed on evacuation order, leave immediately. If placed on evacuation alert, be prepared to leave quickly. For those traveling, Destination BC's Know Before You Go webpage is regularly updated to provide updates on the wildfire situation and serves as a one-stop shop for visitors looking for key information such as Drive BC and BC Wildfire Service webpage links for fires of note and along with Emergency Management BC updates. If the area you were planning to travel to is impacted by wildfires or under an evacuation alert or order, please connect with a local visitor center to rebook your trip to another area of the province. British Columbia is a very large and diverse province, and there are many areas that do not directly or are not directly impacted by wildfires and open for business. For donation management, I'd like to encourage everyone to avoid making donation of physical items. First Nations communities, local authorities, and evacuation centers may not be able to accept or manage material donations. Unless a community has asked for specific goods, British Columbians who wish to help are asked to make a monetary donation to trusted organizations such as the Canadian Red Cross, United Way, or Food Banks BC, which are supporting the provinces and local authorities in providing assistance to those affected by wildfires. Cash is the most effective way to help those affected by wildfires. The governments of BC and Canada are matching donations to the Canadian Red Cross. The value of that donation can be tripled by provincial and federal matching. So you can donate to the Red Cross British Columbia Fires Appeal Fund in several ways, online or by calling toll-free 1-800-418-1111. You can also donate in person at BC liquor stores and BC cannabis stores. And last but not least, please don't hesitate to reach out to your local Canadian Red Cross contacts for donations. That's all I have for now, and happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Now we turn it over to Staff Sergeant Janelle Choyette, BC RCMP spokesperson.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us here today. Not a significant update from us from the RCMP today, just reassuring you that we are working very closely with our partners at EMBC and the BC Wildfire Service, along with our municipal partners in each of our jurisdictions that has been impacted by evacuation order or alert. And we do echo, of course, the information that has previously been provided with respect to getting out of those areas safely and in an orderly manner. You may receive information through a number of different channels, and if an officer does come knocking on your door, that that we are asking for your respect and that you are abiding by the routes that are open and identified in your communities at that time. And of course, with the shift of a wind, that route may indeed be closed, and we're doing our best to supplement the information that's being provided by those regional districts. But it's certainly imperative that you are following those evacuation orders and getting out as safely and quickly as possible in an orderly manner to the pre-identified areas. Our members are continuing to patrol those areas that are under evacuation order. And to date, we haven't received any complaints, but we will continue to do so. And if you have concerns about your property, please reach out to the police of jurisdiction, your RCMP jurisdiction there, and we can do what we can to work with the regional district and take a look at any concerns you may have and address those concerns. We did earlier today issue a news release with respect to not something with the BC wildfire in general, but some suspicious fires that were sparked near Salmo over the weekend, which are very concerning for us, and I'm sure for our partners at BC Wildfire Service, and those are being investigated as suspicious. They appear to have been human caused. It looks like about a total of seven blazes that were set and thankfully have been put out, but we really don't want to be having to use our BC Wildfire Service resources in order to supplement fires that have been appear to have been intentionally caused. There were some witnesses that have described that individual fleeing from the areas of the appear to be intentionally set fires, and that person was described as wearing tan colored pants, but we are appealing to anybody who may have been in the area and was a witness to either the incidents that occurred on July 24th at the intersection of Highway 3 and Highway 6. There were about 4 intentionally appeared deliberately set fires there. And then since Saturday's report, there have been several small blazes that one on July 26th on Lagoon Road and a fire at about 4:30 p.m. again on July 26th up the Bombay. And then last one, 5 o'clock near the intersection of Highway 3 and 6 again in Salmo. So if you have information, we're asking you do contact the Salmo RCMP with that information, or you can call us directly at Crime Stoppers as well.
And finally, we'll turn it over for a few words from Dr. Henry Bonney, Provincial Health Officer.
Thank you very much. And just to note that I'm talking to you today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples here in Vancouver today. And I just wanted to bring people's attention to the fact that we're starting to expect heat to rise again in areas of the province, particularly in the interior over the next few days, and that this will add an additional complication, as we know, to the challenges that people are facing right now. And I want to just remind people about the importance of staying cool during these heat events. If you don't have access to air conditioning, trying to find cooler indoor alternatives so that you can let your body cool down over time, and to pay attention to those who are more likely to have ill effects from heat, particularly infants and young children who can't cool themselves down, who rely on adults to monitor their environments and to provide them with fluid and ways to cool down. People who are underhoused or have fewer options to avoid prolonged heat, and people who are 65 years of age and older, or with heart problems or breathing difficulties. It can be very challenging, and as we know, heat effects can creep up on people, particularly when it doesn't cool off at night. So planning things like keeping your outdoor activities before the heat builds up during the day or later in the evening, drinking plenty of water or other fluids, avoiding physical work or exercise outdoors in the heat of the day, and making sure that you're taking rest breaks. It is important to stay in the shade or to create shade or to find places, indoor air-conditioned buildings. Other methods that we can help others who aren't as mobile to do are things like having a cool towel, having a cool sheet, and then blowing a fan on the cool sheet, the wet, damp sheet. That helps you release heat as well. Also incredibly important, never leave children or pets alone in parked cars. Heat can build up very, very quickly, and it can be lethal to particularly young children and to pets. So even leaving windows slightly open is not enough in the types of heat that we're seeing right now. So I call on people, please, to regularly check on those in your lives who may not be as mobile and may need some assistance during this period of time. We know that as well, the complication of the wildfire smoke that is also in some areas. One of the things that we do know is when the smoke is heavy, it actually dissipates the heat a little bit. And so it is important for you to keep windows closed, keep inside, try and stay away from the smoky skies as well. And making sure that you have your rescue medications available to you. And right now, that's very important to make sure you have those now and know where you can go for treatment with some of the health centers no longer accessible in some areas that are under evacuation alerts and orders. So just a warning that we need to look out for each other as we're getting into another period of both heat, smoke, and the ongoing issues that we're dealing with wildfires for these next few days. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes the operational updates for today. A reminder to media on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. A reminder as well to media on the line, please take yourselves off speaker, phone, or Bluetooth if you're asking a question. For the first question, we go to Lisa Cordasco, Vancouver Sun.
Thank you. I'm interested in finding out more about how many people had to be rescued by helicopter, over what period of time, what other methods of rescue may have been used for how many people, and why are people ignoring evacuation orders?
Yeah, so I don't have the exact numbers of how many people have had to be rescued. I am aware of at least 3 situations where we had to divert our resources, either on the ground or in the air, to assist with evacuating people that got caught behind the fire line and their evacuation route or their escape route was cut off. I don't have the exact numbers of those individuals, and it's hard to speculate. I would hate to speculate on why people do stay behind. I think it's an emotional time. I think there's many people that have lived on the land in these rural areas that feel a real need to stay back and defend their properties. I guess my message to them, though, is although you've lived on that land for generations and for a long period of time, even our seasoned firefighters are seeing behavior and conditions that we've never seen in this generation. And so there's a cautious message there to say, like, you may have seen fire before, but the behavior and the traits that we're experiencing over the last few years are something that's much more different than what we've seen in the past. And that's what's concerning to us when people aren't taking the advice and the recommendations that local governments are placing them when they place them under evacuation order.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Thank you for that response. You mentioned earlier the number of fires being caught, what a large number this is compared to other numbers, and we're only halfway through the season. So is it reasonable to assume that the final cost of fighting fires could be double from what it is right now, or even triple, equal to the money that was spent in 2017?
Yeah, it's hard to speculate what the final number will be. But the main message that I would have for the public and the British Columbians is that we have access to the funding that we need at all times to procure the resources that we require to protect life and property, protect critical infrastructure. So essentially, we have access to what we need in funding to be able to provide those resources to our regional centers to be able to do the job that they've been asked to do. However, with that said, I think this is something that we've seen not only kind of throughout this province, but certainly across the western side of North America, where we're seeing these more extreme fire seasons, longer fire seasons, and more intense fires, which is obviously increasing the costs quite significantly to suppress these fires. I think the one thing that we've seen coming out of 2017 is a much higher investment in fuel mitigation treatments so that we can help starting to offset those suppression costs. And I think following the season like we're going to experience this year and have already, that argument will continue to be made about what do we invest in to be proactive and preventative versus what we need to essentially pay for in the suppression efforts.
For the next question, we go to Marcella Bernardo, News 1130.
Hi there, Rob. I'm not sure if you're the person who has to answer this, but what efforts are being made to try to get volunteer fire brigades to help in areas like Pinatan or other smaller communities that have relied on volunteer firefighters, and what kind of funding support is offered to them when they are able to provide assistance?
So I'm actually not the best person to ask that question. I don't know if Peter, you're able to address it. It's actually through local governments where that funding for those volunteer brigades are mostly focused on. So I'm not sure if we have the right people on this call today to answer that question, but I'll turn it over to Peter and just see if you're able to provide a bit more clarity to that.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. We'll have to follow up on getting some more information based on the volunteer brigade question. Thank you.
Okay, Marcella, do you have a follow-up?
I did. I was regarding what happened in Lytton during the last heat wave. Is there any way that you can try to mitigate that we can protect people? Like, is there an alert system that can be used to, if the heat gets so bad later this week that we see a fire sparked too close to a community like that, how can we make sure that what happened in Lytton doesn't happen again?
Yeah, for that question, message I would really like to focus on is for any sort of fires that we're forecasting upcoming in the coming weeks, it's really important for residents and communities to follow their local authority messages, any sort of updates that are being provided by either social media by their local authority or some of the formal methods in which local authorities will communicate. And so we just want to really recommend and reinforce that a single information source or a single approach is best augmented by a multifaceted approach for alerting communities on the threat of wildfire. And currently, with the orders and alerts that are in place, it's really important for residents and communities to follow those instructions and be prepared to respond accordingly.
For the next question, we go to Ben Milger, CTV.
Thank you. In terms of the people who are ignoring evacuation orders and then require rescue, are there potential legal implications for people who put themselves in that situation?
Yeah, I don't want to speculate on those examples or situations. I think it's important that each situation is looked at on a case-by-case basis. And that's all I'll have for that answer. I don't know if anyone else would like to provide something there.
Yeah, so maybe I'll chime in quickly, Peter. So for me, it's less about the legal end of things, and it's more about the safety of the individuals. As you've heard, the BC Wildfire Service and my fellow colleagues that are on the call today since the beginning of this season, I mean, our focus is on the protection of life and property. That goes with our staff and our partners that are on the fire line, and it certainly goes with the general public. And so, you know, for us, that is the number one priority. And so it does put a lot of stress in the system for my staff when they know that people have stayed behind and they know that the risk is high. and we definitely communicate that message to the people on the ground. But when a situation arises that turns into an emergency situation that is threatening the lives or the safety of individuals, that creates a lot of stress for our staff that is avoidable if we follow the evacuation orders. So I don't look at it from a legal perspective. I look at it from a certainly wanting to make sure that everyone is safe in these really dynamic and complex situations.
Ben, do you have a follow-up?
I do. This one is for Staff Sergeant Soyet. In terms of the suspected arson near Salmo, you mentioned that witnesses had seen somebody. Is there any more of a description than that they were just wearing tan pants? Was there a vehicle involved? Was it a man or a woman? Anything more you can tell us about that?
Yeah, the only description, Ben, we have is that there was a man who was seen running from the scene and that he was described as wearing a pair of tan colored pants. That's really all we have, but we are again asking for anybody who may have been in the area. We understand actually it was very fortunate there were fire crews that were traveling through the area and were able to extinguish the blazes quite quickly. But there was one individual who was seen wearing those tan colored pants that was spotted leaving the fire scene on July 21st or 24th, at the Highway 3 and Highway 6 intersection, which we're very interested in identifying. But of course, we're going to need some more witness accounts, and we are looking at alternatives with respect to gathering information from any CCTV or any surveillance video. But if you were in the area, saw the blaze, saw the firefighting efforts that were underway there, to please call the Salmo RCMP directly so we can get that information and we can get in touch with you. Again, I remind you, it was at about July 24th on at Highway 3 and 6, and there were additional blazes again following that blaze on Saturday evening. There were one July 26th at the end of Lagoon Road. Now that was at 5 a.m. and then a fire at 4:30 p.m. up the Bombi. I guess locals will be familiar with that area. And then again at 5 p.m. at the intersection of Highway 3 and 6. Since that incident, both those were on the 26th again. So if anybody was in the air of any of those incidents and has any witness accounts or any dash cam video, we are appealing to you to get in contact with us at the Salmo RCMP.
For the next question, we go to Brennan Phillips, Penticton Western News.
Yes. Hello. My question is, the armed forces have arrived in Penticton and they've also been deployed to Vernon. We know which fires the Penticton one will be on. Which fires are the Vernon forces going to be deployed onto? Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't believe so. The first 90 personnel that came from the military have been deployed to the Thomas Creek fire, I'm told, and their first day is tomorrow. And if I'm understanding correctly, the next deployment batch was stationed or sent to the Vernon military base to get briefed and be ready to go, but we haven't assigned them a target yet. So it could be anywhere from up into the Caribou or one of the fires in the Okanagan, or even as far away into the Kootenays. But that hasn't been decided yet where that second group of military has been assigned to.
Brennan, do you have a follow-up?
I do. It had been mentioned earlier that the temperatures are expected to rise again over the coming days. Is that expected to exacerbate the current fire situation or make additional fires more likely?
So we're paying very close attention to the forecast, obviously, and what we watch for this time of year, for the most part, is lightning. So when we see that instability in the forecast that creates lightning, and with or without precipitation, that's what really concerns us from a new start perspective. But what the forecast is showing in the next few days is a bit of a mixed bag. As I said earlier, temperatures are supposed to increase up to almost 40 degrees in the South Okanagan by the weekend with lower relative humidities. The blessing right now, or so far in the forecast, is the winds aren't going to be extreme. And so it's a bit of a positive and a negative, where it's not great that the temperatures are increasing, but the air mass is so stable that we're not seeing those winds. Because really, from our perspective right now, on some of these fires that are located in the South Okanagan and even up in White Rock area, up by Salmon Lake, those field types are really susceptible to wind-driven events. And so the wind is actually our biggest enemy in this case, even though we do not welcome the hot and temperatures and low humidities. It's the wind that we're really concerned about. So we're, our intelligence right now is telling us that we shouldn't see a significant wind event for the next few days, but we will see those higher temperatures. So burning will increase, but we're hoping not to any significant amount.
We have time for one more question, and we'll go to Hina Alam, Canadian Press.
Hi, my question is a follow-up on the extreme temperature and the fire. Doesn't it become much harder to fight these fires when the temperature is so high? So, how do you plan to fight? What happens when the temperatures are this high and you have to fight these fires, because the water probably just evaporates before it even reaches the fire? So, how do you plan on fighting these fires when the temperature is this high?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a combination of a number of tactics, and it really depends on the incident itself. But as you were alluding to in your question, dropping water from the air in those type of temperatures is less effective because of the evaporation. But what we tend to see on the ground is, as we have that heavy equipment building our containment lines or our machine guards, staff on the ground following up, the firefighters actually following up behind that equipment, will utilize their water sources, digging into the ground, trying to reinforce that line to what we call a bit of a black line off that guard to remove any fuel, either through burning or just putting out any of the fire that's leading up to that guard, so that it will reinforce those guards to hold that fire in future wind events and things of that nature. That's really the tactic, is to reinforce those guards to hold the fire in the box that we're trying to keep it in. Aerial resources become a bit more challenging because of the higher temperatures and just the evaporation. But even with our air tanker fleet that uses retardant, the red stuff that's mixed in with the water, it's actually designed that way so that it will stick on the vegetation, even with that heat, and will actually not evaporate as quickly to help slow the fire down and suppress the fire to allow ground crews to get into that area and really put the fire out in those certain spots and reinforce those guards. But from a firefighting perspective, it certainly is more challenging. It's more challenging for our men and women that are out there in that heat. It's making sure that they look after themselves. It's making sure that we try to put them up in the most comfortable places possible during their deployment with us, drinking lots of fluids and eating well, because it's very demanding work, as anyone that has fought fire knows, or anybody that's seeing this work on TV and in the media that these individuals do. It's hats off to them. They do an incredible job in very difficult conditions.
Gina, do you have a follow-up?
I do. I was wondering if Dr. Bonnie Henry could tell us a little bit about what kind of health conditions are exacerbated, that's a hard word, exacerbated by the heat wave, and what, especially now, because usually we see that with smoke, the sun is blocked a little bit and temperatures come down, but right now, in spite of the smoke and wildfires, the wind conditions are such that we are seeing temperatures go up. So what happens? Who are the people who are most susceptible? What kind of health conditions? And also, how many people so far have died because of the heat wave? Thank you so much for this.
Thank you for that question. And And it is actually very similar, the people who have issues with wildfire smoke and smoky skies, as the same people who often have issues with heat as well. So we know that very young people, infants and young children are more susceptible, but also older people who your body doesn't acclimatize to the heat as well the older we get, and we don't sweat as much, so we have to take other measures to cool ourselves down. As well, people with chronic conditions that increase the workload on the heart and lungs. So people who have asthma, who have COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, heart disease, and diabetes particularly. But we also know that pregnant people also have issues with both wildfire, smoky skies, and with heat. So we have people like that in our lives. We need to check on them. We need to make sure that we're supporting them to find places that are cool with clean air. And thankfully, both of those places tend to be the same, where you have air-conditioned spaces. And I know many of the municipalities in the Lower Mainland and across the interior are opening up cooling places. But you can also go to libraries. You can go to the malls, and where there is more HVAC systems that are able to cool people down more effectively. One of the things that we learned through the very extreme heat event that we had earlier this month is that people who live alone and don't have the ability to cool themselves down, it can sneak up on you quite quickly, particularly earlier on in the year when we're not as acclimatized. We do actually acclimatize over a period of weeks in the summer to being able to withstand more heat. So we are still in that period where people are susceptible. So if there are people who are living alone, who aren't very mobile, your neighbors, your friends, check on them and make sure that they have ways to cool down, particularly at night. So we are hoping that what we're seeing, or at least we're hearing, that there will be opportunities for the heat to dissipate a bit at night, and that's a good thing. That's what we is the most dangerous, is when we don't get cooling in the evening. But finding ways to stay cool at night are really important. And I mentioned some, having a cool towel that you keep in the fridge or the freezer and putting that around your neck, having sheets that you keep damp, and a fan that can help you cool yourself down as well. So those are the things that we need to look for over this next little while. And also to remind people that heat is the most dangerous of what we are seeing. So if we are closing windows and it gets too hot in the house because of the smoke, we really need to be aware of the heat as well. So that's important for people. In terms of numbers, we don't have, obviously, we have not had that buildup of heat over the last little while, so we'll be watching and monitoring what happens over the next few days. And the team that I work with at the BC CDC is doing a review of our heat event to see if we can find particular neighborhoods or areas where we can have more support to people in communities who aren't as mobile for the next heat events that are bound to happen in the next few weeks and months and years in this province.
Thank you very much to our speakers and to media for joining. That concludes today's information update. Our next scheduled update is set for Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.